Old boss fired me, so I took him to court, got him fired, and ended up with more money than ever. I got hired as a veterinary assistant at an animal shelter, which was a huge accomplishment for me because I spent many years interning for free at an exotic animal rehab center and working $10 per hour at a sanctuary that had a lot of animals needing daily medical care. I eventually got a decent paying job in animal welfare. I used to volunteer for this shelter too, so I really thought I hit the jackpot with this job. Week 1, fantastic. My manager, we'll call her A, was training me. She frequently told me how impressed she was with my ability to handle animals with ease. Even a few staff members told me they hadn't seen someone so new be able to keep up at their high pace. The only red flag was seeing a staff picture with a bunch of X's over a lot of their faces, but I was just so happy and proud to be working there that this didn't even register as a red flag until I got fired. Week 2, Abe passed my training to the 2 licensed vet techs to take turns training me. We'll call one B and the other C. Beeb immediately radiated a superiority complex, but I played along since I was already used to it from previous unprofessional workplaces. The other places I worked were cliquey and full of gossip, even though they were mostly people my age. It was weird that B and C were well into their 40s and still acting this way. When B was training, she hardly trained me at all. She'd ignore me while doing computer work and left me to handle everything. That was fine, as I wanted to work with the animals. However, anytime I'd ask a question, she would roll her eyes and say, "You should ask the veterinarian," making me feel bad for trying to learn. When C was training me, she micromanaged to an extreme degree, hovering over my shoulder as I drew vaccines and did blood tests. It was distracting, and C often got frustrated with me, probably because there was nothing to correct. I tried making small talk, but she ignored everything I said, so I eventually stopped talking altogether. Week 3, the staff's attitude toward me completely changed. Everyone went silent and stared as I walked by. It was bizarre. I would try to do my responsibilities, but B would stop me and have me fold towels or mop another room. At first, I thought it was just an off day, but it happened for 3 straight days. I realized by the end of each shift that I was only doing grunt work. Worse, they began bullying me. I overheard B whispering to 2 other assistants, loud enough for me to hear, "Ew, look at her nails. She doesn't even have a band-aid? That's hygienic," followed by laughter. I have anxiety and pick at my nails, so I started wearing band-aids, which needed constant replacement because I was washing dishes and cleaning. They mocked my toe walking, I'm autistic, made fun of me for drinking an oil pop because does she really need digestive support? Gross, and frequently called me annoying. All of this happened within earshot, while I held back tears, doing grunt work for hours. It felt like a humiliation ritual. Week 4, this is where things get juicy. There was a staff meeting with no appointments for the first half of the day. After the meeting, everyone was sitting around chatting, except for me, of course. I was completely alienated. The clinic head, let's call him D, walked into the clinic and said, "Hey, can you come into my office so we can talk about your performance?" In front of everyone. All eyes were on me as we walked into his office. He left the door wide open and said, "Based on your performance report, it seems like you have the right attitude and energy, but you just aren't catching on." I pushed back, listing all the tasks I was doing, from drawing vaccines to checking patients in and out. I asked what I wasn't catching on to. He stuttered and said, "Well, you're asking too many questions, leaving without telling anyone, and being too fidgety around patients." My eyes welled up, and I asked to shut the door. D agreed, and I explained that I was autistic, bipolar, and had extreme anxiety. His eyes went wide, and he said, "Oh." After a long pause, he asked, "How can we accommodate you?" I explained that I left to replace my band-aids and apologized for not informing anyone, promising to do so in the future. I also said I needed more hands-on training. He ended the conversation by saying he'd need to inform HR, A, and the other manager but promised to treat me with respect. I walked out of the office in tears, and there was B waiting outside. She laughed at me and said, "Hi." I still smiled and said hi back. When I returned to the clinic, nobody would even look at me. The last 4 hours of my shift were pure humiliation. There wasn't even grunt work to do. I was literally just standing there. I wanted to ask to go home early, but I was too scared, so I spent the rest of my shift going in and out of the bathroom, having panic attacks every 10 to 15 minutes. It was the longest 4 hours ever. The next day, A was training me again, and I was finally able to do tasks that weren't just cleaning. However, the staff still acted strange, which only fueled my anxiety and made it hard to focus. During my lunch break, I went to D's office to speak to him privately. I started crying, telling him how everyone was just staring at me like I was invisible, and I felt like I was being judged. D responded, "I think I know what's going on. There is a worry that you might not work out, but I can assure you, nobody is judging you. We want you to succeed." Still crying, I asked if there was anything he could do. I wasn't sure what I expected him to do, but anything would have been better than what he actually did. D looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Well, you might not make a good tech." Notice how he started calling me a tech, even though my title was assistant, just to mess with my head more. My jaw literally dropped. Then he said, "I don't know what to tell you. Just go out there and kick ass." I left his office completely dumbfounded, and at the end of my shift, I asked A what my strong points were and what I needed to improve on. All she said was, "Well, things will either stay the same or get better. You're done with your shift, so you can go home now." I went home crying again and actually started to doubt my abilities. That was until I checked the Glassdoor and Indeed reviews for this place. At least half of the reviews told the exact same stories. People being bullied by the techs, reprimanded for frivolous reasons, fired for those same reasons, and that success had nothing to do with skill but everything to do with who liked you. At that moment, I knew I needed to start a paper trail, but I didn't know how or where to start. However, they gave me a great start by having D text me a little after 11 p.m. with an updated schedule that had me working the next 6 consecutive days in a row. In the interview, we had specifically agreed that I would work no more than 4 days a week because of school and the fact that I couldn't afford more than 4 Uber rides a week. I immediately emailed D and told him that, due to my frequent panic attacks and crying spells from our disciplinary talk, I would not be able to make it into work tomorrow, and I thanked him for the accommodation. He emailed me less than 15 minutes later, saying, "I hope you feel better soon. Let me know when you're ready to come back to work." It wasn't even a lie, I was a total mess. I had already worked 4 days that week, so the next day, I emailed D again, saying the same thing. He replied, saying that I could take as much time off as I needed and to let him know when I was ready to return. He knew I had him in a corner at that point. Around 3 p.m. that same day, HR emailed me, saying, "I know it's your day off, but we need to schedule a call to chat tomorrow." I knew exactly what was going to happen and told him I'd call at 4:30 p.m., making him sweat all day at work. The next day at 4:30 p.m., I called HR right on the dot, and he told me there have been some red flags, so I asked him to elaborate. He stuttered and said, "Well, you know the stuff D talked to you about in his office." I told him that we spoke about my disabilities, not my performance. HR was speechless. You could hear him holding his breath as I explained how the conversation had gone. He sounded like a malfunctioning robot, repeating, "Your termination is effective immediately. I will send you an email confirmation." I kept pushing back, demanding specific reasons, and said, "Name one thing I've done wrong." HR just hung up on me. They basically handed me a lawsuit, but I still fell into a deep depression. In 2018, I was placed on a 5,150 hold and admitted to the ICU wing of the psych ward, if that gives you an idea of how bad my bipolar disorder can get. I had worked for so many years on my mental health and gaining work experience, and I actually thought I had made it in life for a second. Not only were my dreams crushed, but so was my self-esteem. Luckily, you have 180 days to file a complaint with the EEOC. Around day 150, I finally got off my couch and found an attorney to take my case on contingency. The complaint was filed at around day 165 or something like that. I waited long enough for them to feel safe because clearly, they knew they could get sued. I gave HR the kiss of death with my late-night email asking for a copy of my most recent pay stub. They wanted to mediate, which I was open to. HR was so unprofessional that he was late to the mediation, and the CFO was furious. Their offer was insulting. $700. I obviously declined, and we continued the EEOC process. It took well over a year before I was finally able to issue a notice of right to sue, NRTS, in early June of this year. By the end of the month, we reached a 5-figure settlement that was around 35 times their original offer at mediation. It's taxed, and I had to pay the contingency fees, but this was never about the money, it was about my dignity. Plus, since I've been focusing on my mental health and getting my degree, I'm definitely not rich by any means, but the leftover money can still wipe away a few tears. The main reason I'm writing this is because, a few nights ago, I checked their website to see if anyone had actually been fired, and to my surprise, D wasn't listed on their website anymore. Just to confirm, I looked at his LinkedIn profile, and his employment there ended in June 2023, the month I issued the NRTS. Now it says he's a self-employed instructor at some consulting firm or business, whatever that is. I'm pretty sure when people leave a job on good terms, they make a post on LinkedIn about how they're leaving and moving on to new opportunities. D hasn't posted anything in over a month, which tells me they didn't part on good terms. I was so pumped. This was way more validating than the settlement check.